Hello, I'm John, and today I have a few nonfiction books to talk about. I don't know how many I'm going to talk about in this particular video. I have quite a big stack. This goes all the way back into March, and I'm just going to do as many as I feel comfortable talking about in one video. I don't want this to be 45 minutes long or an hour long like my last few videos. So, like I said, this goes all the way back into March. So, if my memory is not as good as it should be about these books, I apologize. So the first book is The Last Voyage of the Lusitania by A. Hoehling and Mary Hoehling. This is a nonfiction narrative account of the last voyage and sinking of the Lusitania in May of 1915 by the German U-20 and off the coast of Ireland. And this is a really interesting look into that because the Hoehlings were able to talk to survivors of the Lusitania sinking. And so I actually wrote some things down here. It's been about a month since I finished this. So at the time, the Lusitania was pretty much the most advanced ship in the world. It had a bunch of electrical amenities and things like that that other ships just didn't have. And so people thought it was very, very fast. It had actually broken the world record for speed, which it had gone something like 600 miles in a 24-hour period or something like that. 617 miles in a single day. So it had, I've written this down, 4 steam turbines, 70,000 horsepower, world record holder for 617 miles in a single day. Electric steering controls, electric operation of 175 watertight compartments, and electric fire detection, electric lifeboat launches, the fastest and safest ship in the Atlantic. So the thing about this is that it allows you to get a look into the people's minds at the time, and so many of them really discounted the threat of German submarines, even though unbeknownst to the captain and the crew, that just on the voyage between New York City and the coast of Ireland where they were going, there had been, let's see, like I said, I had to write things down here. It's been so long. There were 23 vessels torpedoed by German submarines in the location around where the Lusitania was finally sunk. And people were thinking, well, the Lusitania is so fast, we can outrun German submarines. But that's not how it works, right? At this time, it was a trap, right? I mean, they know where these ships are going to have to go. There are shipping lanes, there are ports. All the submarine has to do is sit outside of a port and wait. And once the Lusitania comes across, it's a simple like geometric equation, and you figure out, well, the torpedo goes this speed, the ship's going this speed, we're going this speed. Where will these torpedo and the ship, cross paths? That's all you have to do, and that is all that the U-20 did under, I think it was Walter Schweiger. So there is kind of some ridiculous accounts by people who really, really should have known better. People who were, say, in the Admiralty, people who really should have known better. But they let the Lusitania go anyway. And so this is a really interesting account of, well, when you've read a lot of books like I have about shipwrecks, about sinkings of ocean liners during the world wars, all of that tends to read very similar. So we have a ship that was floating, now it's sinking. So some people will panic. Some people will act completely irrationally. Some people will be very, very calm. And that's basically, in different parts of the ship, there will be people panicking over here. There will be people very calm over here. That's just exactly how it was on this. And the interesting thing about the Lusitania is that it sank in water shallow enough so that when it started to sink, the bow of the ship actually hit the bottom and the stern was sticking out. I believe it might have been the other way around. But so there is an interesting account in here of the captain. He was clinging to the one of the masts as the Lusitania went up, 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 and he thought this is the end of his life, and then it hit bottom. So here is the Lusitania, and it was struck by a torpedo, not on this side, but flip the image, it was on the other side. It hit somewhere in here, and it was moving too fast at the time to put down the lifeboats, and so quite a few people were swept up into the propeller and that sort of thing. The lifeboats, it was just moving far too fast, and some of them were panicking, some people were jumping in. There were 1,193 victims, and I just really enjoyed this. This was a really good look into this incident, this disaster. So the next book is Casino. And this is my fourth take or so, and I've gotten down into the weeds on this quite a bit, and then I realized I don't really need to get down in the weeds. So this is Casino by Nicholas Pileggi. This is the book that inspired the movie, clearly. So Nicholas Pileggi also wrote Wise Guy, which was turned into the movie Goodfellas, Ray Liotta and a couple of the guys on the cover. Basically, this is the same story that's in the movie, so the names are different in the movie. So you have Tony Spilotro, who was in the Mafia, and he moved to Las Vegas along, well, they did it separately, but Lefty Rosenthal was like a bookie, a really, really successful bookie who had been run out of every other place he was in. And Lefty would meet a woman named Jerry, and she was a very high-class hooker. She was making something like $6,000 a month, $60,000 a month, not $6,000, $60,000 a month, something like $5,000 an evening when she decided to go out. So guys would come in from out of town, they'd pay her money, you know, they'd go to the casinos and do all this stuff. Everybody on the strip knew her, and Lefty was smitten with her. I think that he saw in her, I think he believed that she was like himself. So he was a high-class hustler, she was a high-class hustler, and he thought that they should get together and be hustlers together and ride off into the sunset. That's not how it worked. She really didn't take very well to being married. She didn't like him very much. He was cheating on her all the time. She was cheating on him all the time. She was drinking all the time. He was drinking all the time. She was doing drugs. He made really poor decisions about like putting a bunch of money and jewelry into safety deposit boxes. She was still in love with her high school boyfriend, who was like a really cheap hood and pimp. And this is just a wild story, right? And so Tony Spilotro was running the hole-in-the-wall gang. They were literally busting holes into the side of people's houses to go in and steal jewelry and things like that so they could bypass the security systems. Lefty wasn't even really supposed to be in a casino. Tony Spilotro certainly was not supposed to be in a casino. This is about Lefty's struggle to stay in the casino years at a time. He was having these giant lawsuits between like the Gaming Commission and the Nevada Gaming Commission, the Nevada Gaming Commission, and like the FBI was always looking at him. And it's also the story of like the bosses and how they are dealing with this guy who comes in and buys the casino, and he doesn't know who he's dealing with. Like, he doesn't realize they're in the mafia, and then he gets into it. And so at the same time, the mob is skimming millions and millions of dollars off the top of the income of these casinos, which neither Lefty nor Tony had anything to do with. And they just didn't. That's just the way it was set up. So it's Alan, I think his name was Alan Glick. I can't remember exactly, but he's the guy who bought the casino. He was really dismayed because he came in, and there's this guy Lefty working there, and he's like, I don't want him to work here. Like, what does he even do? And Lefty came in and basically said, you have no choice. I have to work here. And he's, what are you talking about? He's like, let's get on the phone and call up the real boss. And so they did. And basically, Alan had to fly to, like in the middle of the night, he had to fly to Kansas City and go to a hotel where he was basically threatened with a gun by the boss in Kansas City. And this was a really interesting look too, because we get a look into mafia families that are not really discussed in most books about the mafia. So I believe there's like the Milwaukee family, and then that's not the name of the family, but it's in Milwaukee, and then the bosses in Kansas City. It's a really interesting look into that. So a lot of this comes from Alan Glick's testimony. I think his name was Alan Glick. Probably wasn't. And so this is really about how this life spirals out of control for these two guys. Lefty because he made a bad choice about who to marry, and Tony because he was really starting to just get too much heat on himself. And so he became kind of a liability for the bosses because they had been brought up on, I guess, RICO charges. And so they started to have quite a few people whacked, and Tony was one of them. Lefty was almost whacked, but he bought this Cadillac. It was like an 83 or an 84 Cadillac. It may have been a little bit earlier than that. Somebody put a bomb in his Cadillac, and when he went to start it, all these flames started shooting out of the dash, shooting out of like the air conditioner vents, and he was able to get out and the car blew up. And so he just barely survived. And So this is also about the downfall of his marriage, like these screaming matches they would have. They were cheating on each other. They were drinking all the time. Jerry was doing drugs all the time, and she loved her her high school boyfriend was like a pimp in a cheap hood. She was always going back to him, and she would eventually be murdered later on after Lefty and after they split up. Uh, she was given a hot shot by some guys she knew, probably because they were trying to steal money from her, but she didn't have any money anymore. Um, just a really wild story, a really wild story. Nicholas Pileggi, he did a really good job of writing this. So we see it also. We see this from Lefty Rosenthal, who is so both Lefty Rosenthal and a guy named Frank Collada talked to Nicholas Pileggi. So Frank Collada was basically Tony Spilatro's right-hand man during this time. They grew up together in Chicago. It was a really good book. I really enjoyed this. I like I like Wise Guys better because it's a tighter narrative because we're seeing it from uh, a more narrow perspective. We're just seeing Wise Guys from Henry Hill's perspective, whereas this is more spread out and takes place over a wider cast of individuals. And so the last book is The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. I went into this expecting something I think completely different. This was not particularly good. So this is supposed to be a book about why people become fanatics, why they get involved in these mass movements, and why they might cling to a leader or a faith, a religion, or something of that nature. This just was not very good. I read a review of this that said it was like sitting down at a bar and having a drunk guy come over and start pontificating to you about everything that he thinks is right, despite the fact that he doesn't know what he's really talking about. And that's pretty close to how I felt about this because it's very sparse. The prose is very sparse, and so we get pronouncements about things like this is the way it is, but there's no evidence given for this sort of thing in most cases. There's no notes, well, there may be notes, but for most of it, it's just this is the way it is because I said so. And so I'm thinking of what is the phrase, a little bit of knowledge is very dangerous or something of that nature. I can't remember the phrase exactly, but a little bit of knowledge in this case led to this book. And so he thought that he knew more than he did. He made some really weird claims. He said some really strange things about social movements, about how it was just not very good. It reminded me of something that a really intelligent high school student might write, where they think they know the answer to everything, but they really don't. And so apparently at the time he wrote this, he was reading a lot of books. He was working as a stevedore on the docks in some city. And this book gained a lot of traction, but it's just not very good. And some of it was obviously not right. And so there were just several things that hit me very strangely while I was reading this. I didn't mark any of them down. I read this whole book in a day, and I just didn't find it very... if you're going to make outright statements about why people become fanatics, why they cling to religion, why they cling to groups and leaders, you really need to give me evidence of it. You can't just say, this is why, because I said so. And this book was really like that. It was just, this is why, because I said so, even though my research is clearly faulty and my understanding of some of these events throughout history is clearly faulty. And I was just disappointed by this. I expected so much more. And yeah, I just didn't like it. And so I am actually losing my voice. I have more books here that I was going to talk about, but I've been talking for quite a while now. I had to do quite a few takes on the casino part of the video. And so I'm going to end it here. I want to say before I end this that I think from now on, instead of trying to get like all my books into one video, I think that I am going to start making videos where I just talk about 2 or 3 books per video and not doing them in any kind of scheduled way, just because that will be easier for me and easier for you, because I know you know, it's hard to sit down and watch a 47-minute video on 4 books, 5, 6 books that you've never heard about. So I'm hoping that by making more frequent videos about fewer books at a time, that way I'll be able to put out more videos, but they will also be shorter and easier to watch and easier to do. Because sometimes, I know you don't see it, but sometimes I talk for like an hour and then I edit the video down to like 30 minutes because I mess up quite a bit. I messed up quite a bit on this video. So, and even as I'm sitting here now, I feel like I probably didn't do these books justice, but like I said, I did read them about a month ago, and my memory is not very good. I only took notes on the last voyage of the Lusitania, and I didn't take notes on Casino or on the True Believer. And so I'm losing my train of thought now. I just wanted to add that little bit and just explain what's going to probably be happening from now on. Just fewer books, more videos. Hopefully. That's my plan anyway. So I want to thank you very much for suffering through this video with me, and I will see you in the next one.